So I need to make sure, do you go by Debbie or Deborah?
Debbie.
Debbie. Okay. So what I want to do, Debbie, is I want to read a passage out of your book because this is such a great summary of what your book is all about. And I see that it talks about your heart, what's in the heart of the book, but I know this is the heart of you. At its heart, this book is about saying no. No to trying to fit these square peg kids into round holes. No to educational and social systems that don't respect and support how they move through the world. No to frustration and isolation, and saying yes to the gifts of these unique children and everything that goes along with who they are. So welcome today. I'm so excited, Debbie, that you're here
Thank you so much, Renee.
to share your story. And I think probably what everyone that's watching here today is going to want to know, what is a differently wired teen?
Well, the term differently wired, I'll just kind of define for you. It's a term I started using when I launched Tilt because I was looking for language to encapsulate humans, but in my focus is kids who have some sort of neurodevelopmental difference. It could be ADHD. It could be being on the autism spectrum. It could be a kid who is gifted. It could be a kid who has dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia, sensory processing, slow processing speed. So there may be no diagnosis at all as well. But I wanted to find a way to positively describe kids and teenagers who are in some way moving through the world that they're not thriving in the way that they could be in some aspect of their lives. Often that's in education, but it could be their social life. It could be other things going on. So it's those kids who they often have invisible differences. And so we don't always know that there's a challenge there. But there's some aspect of the way their brain is wired that makes certain areas of their life more challenging.
But the parents know. Parents see the invisible.
Yeah.
But we don't know. And as I shared with you personally, is that my daughter has ADHD, but we didn't know back then really what it was or what to call it, and certainly not what to do about it. But it was definitely an invisible force within our family.
Yeah, because a lot of times too, I think about my own childhood, and I don't have an ADHD diagnosis, but I definitely have attention issues and executive functioning. I had executive functioning challenges that I've actually learned how to hack for myself. But I was a class clown as a kid. I was hugely disruptive, which my friends now are like, that does not compute to them, but I was. And so many differently wired kids, the way it shows up is that there's a behavioral problem, or this is just a kid who's really intense, or who is manipulative or defiant or oppositional, or all of those things. And so we focus on the behavior. And there's a lot of lack of clarity around what's really going on. And oftentimes as parents, especially if a kid is kind of getting through, we don't often dig deeper to see, is there something actually going on where my child could use more support?
And I've noticed that you mentioned getting through. I noticed that oftentimes many of these things that you noticed that are learning differences, that these young people, they're exceptionally bright as well. So there's like something inside of them that I've noticed that they can somehow navigate because of because of that, but not as effectively as they can, and then they get frustrated. I know that you shared stories in your book about your son would get frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you raised such a good point that with so many kids who who are exceptionally bright or gifted. It's actually called twice exceptional when a child is gifted and has some sort of learning disability or learning difference. And they are so good often at overcompensating. So something like dyslexia, for example, might not be recognized or identified until middle school, which is really late. Because the child is so smart, they've figured out workarounds. And so there are a lot of people who find, in fact, I've met adults who have discovered their own neurodivergence, and it's a real interesting thing to reconcile as an older person, to realize, oh, I have all these unmet needs. And as a kid, this wasn't recognized. But it can be very frustrating for a child because they often know, right? They may not be able to put it in words, but they recognize they're different. They recognize that why am I working harder than everybody else? And it looks so easy when everyone else is doing this. And so there's that kind of internal, which they may or may not share with us as parents.
Right. And especially teenagers, because even if you feel like you have a good relationship with your teen, there's some of those innermost struggles that as they're trying to break away from the parent and find themselves into adulthood going that direction, they're not going to share, gosh, Mom, it seems to really take me a lot longer to do my homework. And I noticed just from experience with my own daughter, parents tend to focus, again, like you said, you're wanting to focus on the positive, and the school system focuses on the negative, the disruptive and rambunctious, that sort of thing. So when we are looking at especially our teenager, here's the things that I hear from my clients, life coaching clients, their parents. They say they're lazy, they're unmotivated, they're big procrastinators, and things like that. Maybe not realizing that might be a side effect or a byproduct of what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, we know that behavior is communication, right? All behavior is communication, and it's often communicating a lagging skill. And so when we have teenagers who are, and I think you nailed it. I hear the same thing. How do I motivate my kid? They're lazy, they're disorganized. All of those things are areas of lagging skill. I don't know any teenager who would choose to be unorganized, or who that feels really good for, or who would choose to not feel driven to do something. It's because they don't have the tools or the ability to know how to move forward, how to plan something, how to pursue something successfully. And, as teenagers, we have all kinds of other things going on too, right? The hormones and the
relationships and
and wanting and trying to figure out who you are and how do I fit in, and I don't want to stand out, so it's just such a complicated time to be differently wired, especially at a time when most teens don't want to be different. So it gets really messy. Yeah.
And that's interesting about, they don't want to be different, but yet to me, the power is in being different and being themselves, and having them recognize all that comes along with that, and their authenticity and their individuality. So there's a conflict there on really what's best for them, and they're trying to move it towards the collective, I guess.
Yeah, I think what's tricky, especially with differently wired teens, is that many of them have had negative experiences, leading up to, they, a lot of parents in my community, in the TIL parenting community, have kids who, like mine, went through multiple schools when they were little and had really negative experiences and internalized this identification as a bad kid, or as a kid who's not smart, or as a kid who's a screw up, or whatever it is. And these are messages that have been reinforced. And so all of that baggage, right, has come with them. And so it's really challenging then when you're a teenager, if you haven't reconciled with that, or you haven't reframed that experience and kind of owned, decided, actually, this is who I am. And there are so many strengths with this profile. There are so many gifts that come with this difference. Sure, there are challenges. I'm not, downplaying those, but if a child enters the teen years without having made that reframe, then they are going to be more likely to not want to deal with it, or not want to call it out, or not speak about it, and just try to hide it and get through, right? Push through, as messy as that might look.
I know that in your book, you shared the story of your son, where he was talking about something that he had been told in school. And you found out that, you said, well, how long have you been told this? How long has this been going on? It's kind of like, well, a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure as a mom, you're like, what? And I think you said your husband wasn't privy to that conversation. And it seems like that's kind of what sparked you really passionately moving forward and researching and doing what you could for your son, but also your book to share with others so they don't. So can you kind of speak to, is there a way that parents can actually find these things out that, we're not in the classroom, and, how are ways, or maybe questions we can ask, or something that we can do to find out, are there negative messages coming through because our son or daughter is differently wired, and people in school don't realize that, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's hard because a lot of teens aren't super communicative. So, and what you're referring to is when my child was younger, he apologized to me for something that was not worthy. It was like, why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything wrong. And he's like, he said to me, I got used to apologizing all the time. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, anytime I blurted something out, or I forgot to raise my hand, or I always had, my teachers would always make me apologize. And that just crushed me, because I'm like, so basically you've been asked to apologize for who you are, because who you are is someone who is so excited that they really want to share what's on their mind in that moment. And you didn't realize how to do that in the appropriate way because you were a little guy. And I didn't know that was going on. I think as parents, especially as parents of teens, part of our job is to pay a lot of attention to what isn't being said, to, and to really work hard to develop real relationship with our kids so that they feel safe talking with us about anything, and looking for little windows. We all know with teenagers, it's very rare that we're going to sit down and have a really deep conversation about something. But sometimes there are these little windows, and if we know if we're listening, if we're really always present in those moments and we're paying attention, sometimes we get a little peek, one little word or line that we can get curious about and think, okay, I need to tread carefully here. Right. But I'm going to be curious about this and start paying attention to this. But it really does begin with making sure that we are in deep relationship with our teenagers, that we have created and invested in a deep connection with them. And that's something, it's never too late to start, but it's really critical.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about curiosity, because that's what, as coaches, we come as, we're coming from a place of curiosity and not judgment. Mm-hmm. Because as parents, like it or not, we have, because we're wanting to raise happy, successful, healthy children to leave the nest, we tend to be more judgmental about things, even if we don't have an innate judgmental personality. And so, but we're more critical of that because we want it so bad, right? As mothers and dads. And so when you realize that they're getting ready to turn something in late, or you're not quite sure how they did on that test that you don't think they studied for, you're not sure. A lot of parents I've noticed will just, and this is what my clients will tell me, say, mom comes in, and as soon as I hit the door with my backpack on the floor, like, how'd your test go? What did you do? How was it like? Just like, they do not like that. And so coming out of curiosity, like, where you're asking a question like, hey, I know you had your test today, or just kind of an open-ended something like that. Or, when you took your test, did it seem like it was something that was, you knew a lot of the information? Just questions that are more curious, and so like, what was your grade, or how did it go?
Like, how are you feeling about today?
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think you raise a really good point about the interrogation that some parents can do. Especially, this goes for all teenagers, but especially with differently wired teens, it's really critical that they feel safe and secure, because they do spend often a lot of time in defense mode or fight or flight mode, because they are overcompensating. They are working extra hard to get through the day, to keep it together, to stay emotionally regulated, to do what's asked of them academically. And it's so critical that home is a place where they can just let the defenses down and not feel pressure, and not feel that we're interrogating them or placing additional demands. It doesn't mean we don't have expectations for them, but it means making sure that the culture, the environment of our home is one of security, of safety, of love, of calm, all of those things. So, and that takes conscious effort, but it's really worth creating. I mean, when I see, Asher, I meet him outside his school building, and he'll come out, and we'll walk home together often. And I make sure that I light up. Like, I want him to see the joy on my face when we make eye contact that first time, every single day, because I want him to first experience a sense of love and connection before anything else happens. And I think that's important, and it takes effort. It's like, I have to be intentional.
Yeah, when you've had a bad day, and just shore yourself up. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you about something that I'm personally not a big proponent of labels. I think labels can adversely affect a lot of people in a lot of ways. And so I don't like to think of it as labeling, like if it's like with my daughter. She, once we knew there was something, but we didn't know until we had the testing later on, college, really. And so, but when we knew that it was ADHD, it's interesting because you don't want to go, oh, you have this, right? But for her, as at college age, I saw, it was almost literally, I saw like this relief come over, like, almost just to the point of tears, where that explains everything. Yep. And even my husband and I were like, wow, okay, now we understand why this and this and this and this. So it was a sense of a relief. So it's kind of a two-edged sword, I guess, a little bit. So I'd like to, ask you about that.
Yeah. I actually just did a huge survey with my community about this too, just to see where people stood, on labels. Like, so the thing about labels is first of all, they're useful in getting services, right? Yeah. So that's really the biggest benefit. Yeah. And so to have a formal diagnosis of something like dyslexia or ADHD or autism spectrum, those diagnoses get you support, like accommodations in school, and you need them. Or to get reimbursement from insurance for certain therapies or tutoring or whatever it is. So they have their purpose. And I like what you said too, because it's this idea of being, I like the word identified. So I was talking with the president of Eye to Eye, which is a mentoring organization for kids with learning and attention issues. And he said, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD. I was identified as having
I love that.
ADHD. And I was like, that feels really good. Like, it makes sense, because that's just that's how his brain is wired.
Right. Yeah.
So I think labels are useful. They don't solve anything. When a lot of us, when our kids are younger and we recognize something's going on and we're seeking, we're doing assessments and we're trying to get answers, we are looking for a plan, right? We want to know, okay, we want answers. And then you get a diagnosis and you're like, okay, now what? Like, that doesn't help me. That's just a label, right? What we want to do is support the areas of weakness, is to support symptoms if there are symptoms. And so that's what's really important. But I do believe there's so much stigma surrounding certain labels. So I like to, I speak openly about labels because I think it's important, just the way a lot of people are speaking out more openly about mental health. It helps to normalize what is a very normal and typical, actually, experience, as opposed to having these things be shrouded in this air of negativity, or this is a bad thing, or we don't talk about that, because our kids internalize that. So all that to say, it's complicated. And I really do support, there are parents who don't tell their kids. They may even get information they choose not to tell their kids. I'm not a fan of that, because I've met adults who found out later and were really upset that their parents withheld this information, because, as you said, kids know, and they may make the fact that they are working extra hard mean something really terrible about themselves. And then there's that sense of relief, like, oh, that's what's going on. Thank you. Now I understand. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm actually just wired this way, along with a lot of other awesome people too, right?
Absolutely. I loved what you just said, is there's nothing wrong with me. And think about that. I mean, just kind of just letting that sit. Think how that makes anybody feel when they can say that to themselves, especially people who have struggled. Wow, that's very powerful to own that. So we have three types of parents, but let's say, for the sake of discussion here, is two types of parents. One, parents that are hearing this and going, wow, those are different things that my son or daughter does, and they have not been diagnosed. So maybe you could speak to the importance of that, how they go about that. And then we have parents whose teens have been diagnosed, but how they are able to kind of navigate through that, as their teens aren't maybe wanting the support.
Yeah, so for the first part, I would say it's really important that we question everything, right?
Yes.
A lot of us go into parenting and we just kind of move ahead based on how we were parented, or the books we read, or the friends we have and how they're parenting their kids. And so we may make choices and make sense of our kids' behavior or their lack of motivation or whatever they're doing through a lens that doesn't consider that there's something else going on. So we have to start just questioning and like asking, like, oh, what if this actually isn't a choice? What if my child isn't choosing to forget to turn in his homework? Or maybe this isn't, maybe this doesn't mean that they don't care about school, but maybe they don't have the skills and they're feeling really overwhelmed. And, so I think we have to do that work on ourselves, like start to just get, back to that word curious, but get curious and start looking at our child. And if they aren't thriving, if our teenager isn't thriving in some way, whether that's grades, or they're feeling they're just not engaged the way they used to be. They're struggling making and keeping friends, whatever, they're super disorganized, or they can't get out the door on time, all of those things. Maybe they're not showing the personal hygiene that we'd like to see or expect from a teen, whatever. Instead of looking at that and trying to fix that problem, take a step back and think, okay, there's something going on here. There's a reason why. And that's my job, is to help figure out what is the reason, because that's where we can support our child, not addressing the external manifestation. And the way you do that is there are wonderful organizations like understood.org is a great one, where you can start to kind of understand, like, oh, there's so many different things going on. Like slow processing speed. I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but I will just say, because I just did a podcast on this this week, that is something that a lot of kids have. And that is, you might have a kid who does well on tests, or who's really bright or reads all the time, but ask them to write a paper, and you might be asking them, like, you might be telling them you're going to torture them. Like, it is the worst thing imaginable. And to write a paper is just an impossibility. That doesn't mean they don't like writing. That's probably a slow processing speed. And there is an actual disconnect between getting the information in their brain, which they might be able to verbally articulate, onto the page. That's a real thing, but we don't look at it that way. We just think this kid hates writing, we got to fix that. We got to make them write more. And that's not what we want to do.
No.
So I think it pays to just start getting curious and, go to Tilt Parenting, look through the podcast and see if anything really starts to resonate. But I would say, if you suspect that there are areas of your life where your teen isn't thriving, there's probably a reason. And it's so worth it to try to get curious about what that is. And then, of course, there are ways to get assessments and work with people. And sometimes it can be really helpful as teens, especially because they're mature enough to be able to do a more formal diagnostic assessment and really get some very concrete, like, kind of breakdown of what's happening with their brains. So you have to remind me of the second part of your question.
Well, I would like to just follow up on this, because I think that it's important unfortunately, we live in a society where there are things that used to be, and you used the word earlier, stigma, are no longer a stigma.
Right.
But still, there may be parents out there that have feelings of just a little intrepidation or something, or a little, I don't really want to know if there's something wrong, which it's not, something's wrong. It's just, like you said, it's just differently wired,
information.
Right? It's information. And so I would just like to encourage parents out there to, if you feel like there's something that that you need to be curious about, that might need to be further discovered, i.e. through a diagnosis, that just own it. Just own it, and whatever it is, that's what it is. It's not going to change your love for your child, or it's actually going to help your child. So it is a gift of love.
100%.
To know what's going on, because you cannot move forward until you know what's going on. You cannot help them move forward, because, today we're talking about teens. My goodness, they're gone just like that from school. And when they leave high school and they go off to college, that's kind of it. They'll connect to you some, but really your job is done in terms of giving them those tools and skills in an environment that's safe and nurturing, and that you can provide. So I just want, and just to encourage parents that it's okay. It's okay. Take action like that. So,
and I'll just add to that. I think it's so important what you just said. And the best thing we can do for our kids is have them launch knowing who they are and understanding how to get what they need. Because if they go to college and they don't, and they've like I did. Like I just got through, right? And then college came and I was like, whoa, because I had, I was smart enough to get by
Right.
without really ever developing the executive functioning skills that I needed to be successful. And that's why so many differently wired kids don't last the first semester of college, because they don't know who they are. They don't know how to ask for what they need, or they don't recognize, oh, this is hard for me. I'm going to have to put extra focus on this. So to give our child that awareness is the best thing that we can do. And it's just information. Like,
yeah, and it's an investment.
Yeah.
I say you invest now in that by finding out what it is, what to do, give them the skills, or you're not going to get the return on your investment, so to speak, when they flunk out of college, with the being differently wired to no fault of their own. You know what I'm saying? So, and that carries a whole set of things that rain down on them on top of being differently wired. Being a failure, all of this, and they just don't realize. So I know that you have a free gift for our parents to take action now. And would you want to go ahead and share that with us? It is your 7-day challenge.
Yes. So this is the Differently Wired 7-day challenge. And basically every day for 7 days, you'll get a super short, I'm talking 2 minutes, super short video with one idea.
Okay.
I'm not giving people a lot of work, but I really believe that so much of the work of best showing up for our kids is doing the deep work on ourselves, or being intentional and purposeful parents. And so the 7-day challenge is going to give you one little thing to think about that day. And I really believe deeply that the littlest reframes, the littlest intention, like maybe just today, I intend to be super curious and observe my child and see what comes up. Like those little things can spark huge changes in our relationship with our kids. So that's the 7-day challenge.
I love that. And I'll be sure and put the link in the video. And how else can they contact you?
So I'm at Tilt Parenting everywhere on social media, Instagram, Twitter, although I don't really hang out on Twitter, Facebook. And then my website is tiltparenting.com. And there are more than 200 podcast episodes with all kinds of experts, including more than 20 conversations with my son when he was younger. So because he used to be able to, well, he doesn't want to talk about on the podcast anymore, but when he was younger, he was happy to share, like, this is what it feels like to get distracted. This is what it feels like when I get frustrated. So he was able to kind of give parents a peek inside of,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Talk about authentic, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it's Tilt, TILT, just to let people know, Tilt Parenting. Again, I'll put the link so you can find Debbie lots of places. And so I know that you have also, we don't want to leave them without a challenge that they can do like right now, today, to move the needle, as I like to say, move the needle. So what is something that you would say, hey, let's try this today or tomorrow to move you forward into, and the challenge, obviously we want them to do this, but this is just a quick win for them. What would you want them to do?
Can I have 2?
You can have as many as you want. So I'm encouraging you parents to, however many she suggests, go ahead and do it, because she knows what she's talking about.
Well, the first one I would say is to end your day. So whenever you're watching this, to end today by looking for or identifying a bright spot from today. So I think this is a great daily practice to do, and just started today. The bright spot might be that my child put his dish in the dishwasher and I didn't even remind him. Like, it could be the littlest thing, but it's important that we start noticing these bright spots, because sometimes they're little and they feel amazing to notice. So that's one. And the second challenge then is for tomorrow in the morning, to sit down and write out what your intention is, how you want to show up for your child that day, and put it like I do it on a Post-it and stick it on my computer, but just so that I can come back to that. Like my intention is to be present when I'm with my teen, or my intention is to, you know, whatever it is, to not jump to conclusions. My intention is to leave lots of space, whatever it can be, but to set that intention, to say it out loud, and see how that kind of impacts the way that you are with your teen.
I love that. I love that. And the sticky note too. And I want to maybe like supersize the second challenge on one of the things that you said was about being present. And I know that I have a lot of teenagers that tell me that even though their parents tell me, oh, they're on their phone all the time, they're telling me the same about their parents. They're on their phone, they're on their iPad, whatever. So I would just encourage them to be the intentional, like you said, and if they're being fully present, that means the electronics are not on the table or anywhere near. And that's something that I can see that's really been at the heart of a lot of the teenagers that I've coached, that they can't tell their parents. So we're telling them today.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Can I just share a
Double
story?
super size.
I think that presence is everything, and it is really hard to do. But I still I have more work than I know what to do with. I will drop everything unless I'm on a call, unless I'm doing something like this.
Right.
I will drop everything to be available for my child if he wants to come in and tell me about what he just created in Blender or whatever. I will just be there for him. And right now, he loves this game Ribbon and Miss, these kind of puzzle games from the 90s.
Wow.
We're going through Ribbon. He's already done it, but he loves to sit with me and help me do these games. So
I
it's
love
not
that.
what I would want to be doing every night, but I do it because it's our thing that we're doing together, and it means so much to him. And there's a huge payoff for me too. Because he wants to spend time,
that's your baby. No matter how old they are, you never outgrow that.
So just making yourself available and really, and it's not always at opportune times, but that is, I think that's the best thing we can do for our teenagers.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing. I know that the parents I'm sure they're just so excited to know what you have shared. And I'm going to make sure that they know how to find you and all the valuable information that you have to give, and take the challenge for today and tomorrow, the challenges, and then go to your 7-day challenge. They'll have the link. I just knew when you would be here that they're with us, that your heart would just shine, and that parents could just see that what's really important, and that their children, no matter how they're wired, that there can be such joy in that. Yeah. And there's help too. And there's help, and to ask for the help, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.